What if I told you that not every thought that enters your mind deserves to be believed? That thought you had this morning, the one that told you you're behind, the one that told you somebody doesn't like you, the one that reminded you of something embarrassing you did years ago, the one that suddenly convinced you that you're not good enough. What if that thought isn't actually you? Because here's something strange about your mind. You can notice your thoughts. You can hear yourself thinking. You can watch an emotion appear. You can even say, "Why am I thinking this?" So if you can observe a thought, who is doing the observing, that question can completely change the way you experience yourself. Because most of us go through life believing that every thought in our head is our voice. A thought appears, and we immediately follow it. I shouldn't have said that. I'm not good enough. They're probably judging me. I need to figure this out. If everything goes wrong, and because the thought happened inside your own mind, you automatically assume it must be true. But having a thought and believing a thought are two completely different things. And once you understand that difference, you begin to create space between you and everything happening inside your mind. So let's slow this down, because this is one of those ideas that sounds simple, until you actually start noticing it in your own life. Think about your thoughts for a second. Where do they come from? You don't sit down every morning and consciously decide, okay, at 9:17 I'm going to think about that embarrassing thing from 5 years ago. You don't schedule every worry, you don't plan every random memory. You don't consciously choose every fear that appears. Thoughts simply arise, you're walking somewhere. And suddenly you remember someone. You're trying to sleep. And suddenly your brain starts replaying an entire conversation. You're having a good day. And then one tiny thing happens and your mind creates a whole story around it. That's the mind doing what the mind does. It produces thoughts. It makes associations. It predicts. It remembers. It compares. It tries to protect you. It tries to understand the world. And because it's constantly talking, we can start confusing the voice of the mind with the entirety of who we are. But you are capable of noticing that voice, and that changes the relationship. Imagine you're sitting in a room with a television playing in the background. The television is showing different scenes. Some are happy, some are sad, some are frightening, some are completely random. You can watch the television without believing that you are the television. Your thoughts can be approached in a similar way. A thought appears, "I am going to fail." Of immediately saying, "I am going to fail." You can notice, "I am having the thought that I might fail." That tiny change creates distance, and inside that distance is choice. Because now you're not completely inside the thought, you're observing it. And this doesn't mean the thought disappears. It doesn't mean you have to force yourself to think positively. It doesn't mean you should pretend everything is fine. It simply means a thought is an event happening in your mind. It isn't automatically a fact. Think about how powerful that is. Your mind can say, "Everyone is judging me." Do you actually know that? Your mind can say, "I'll never be successful." Can you know the future? Your mind can say, "I'm behind everyone else." Compared to what timeline your mind can say, "They don't care about me." Have you actually asked them? The mind is incredibly good at creating stories from incomplete information. And sometimes those stories are useful, sometimes they're accurate, but sometimes they're simply thoughts, and the problem begins when we treat every thought as an instruction. Your mind says, "Don't do it." You don't. Your mind says, "Wait until you're ready." You wait. Your mind says, "People will judge you." You stay quiet. Your mind says, "You're not good enough." You never give yourself the opportunity to find out. And suddenly, a thought that lasted 5 seconds has influenced a decision that lasts 5 years. That's why learning to observe your thoughts matters. Because you can't control every thought that appears, but you can become more intentional about what you do with the thoughts that appear. And this is where the idea of awareness becomes interesting. When people talk about consciousness, they sometimes make it sound like something mysterious you have to travel somewhere to find. But you can start much simpler. Right now, notice that you're reading these words. Notice the sounds around you. Notice the feeling of your body. Notice whatever thought just appeared in your mind. Maybe you weren't even trying to think about anything, but something appeared, and you noticed it. That noticing is awareness. You don't have to create it. You're already experiencing it. And the more you practice noticing, the easier it becomes to recognize. There is a thought happening. Is an emotion happening? Is a reaction happening? I can observe all of this. That doesn't mean you're separate from being human. You're still going to feel angry. You're still going to get nervous. You're still going to have insecure thoughts. You're still going to overthink sometimes. The goal isn't to become someone who never has negative thoughts. That's not realistic. The goal is to stop letting every thought automatically become your identity, because there's a huge difference between I am anxious. And I'm experiencing anxiety right now. There's a difference between I am a failure and I'm disappointed that something didn't work out. There's a difference between nobody likes me and I'm feeling rejected right now. The second versions leave room for change, and that room matters because emotions move, thoughts change, circumstances change, you change. A thought that feels absolutely true at 2 a.m. might look completely different in the morning. A situation that feels like the end of your world today might become something you barely think about years from now. If you identify completely with every temporary mental experience, you can end up treating temporary states like permanent identities. And you don't have to. Now, there's something else I want you to notice. Sometimes the mind doesn't just create thoughts. It creates a story about you. Maybe you've had a few failures. Your mind creates the story. I'm someone who never gets things right. You've experienced rejection. The story becomes, people always leave me. You've struggled with confidence. The story becomes, I'm just an insecure person. Eventually, you stop questioning the story. You start protecting it. You start looking for evidence that confirms it. That's one of the ways our minds can trap us. But what happens when you start observing the story instead? You might say, that's the story I've been telling myself. Not, that is who I am. There's a difference. And that difference gives you room to grow. Because maybe you've been carrying an old description of yourself into a life that has already changed. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. You don't have the same knowledge, the same relationships, the same priorities, the same experiences. So why should every belief you formed back then automatically remain true today? Sometimes growth isn't about creating an entirely new identity. Sometimes it's about questioning the old one. And this is where I want you to try something. The next time you catch yourself having a strong thought, don't immediately argue with it. Don't force it away. Don't tell yourself you're wrong for thinking it. Just pause and say, interesting, I'm having that thought. That's it. If your mind says, I can't do this. Say, noticing the thought that I can't do this. Your mind says, they don't like me. Say, I'm noticing that my mind is interpreting the situation that way. Your mind says, I need to figure everything out right now. Say, I'm noticing that my mind wants certainty. You aren't fighting the mind, you're becoming aware of it. And sometimes awareness is more powerful than resistance. Because when you fight a thought, you can accidentally give it even more attention. But when you simply observe it, you create space. And in that space, you can choose. You can ask, is this thought useful? Is it supported by evidence? Is there another way of looking at this? What would I do if I didn't automatically believe this thought? That final question can be incredibly powerful. Because sometimes the thing stopping you isn't reality. It's your interpretation of reality. And once you realize that, you can start experimenting with different interpretations, not fake positivity, not pretending everything is perfect, just flexibility. Maybe instead of, I always mess things up, you say, I made a mistake and I can learn from it. Instead of, I'm behind, you say, my path doesn't have to look like everyone else's. Of, I can't, you say, I don't know how yet. That little word yet leaves the door open. And that's what awareness gives you, options. Now I want to make something clear. You are not supposed to spend every second analyzing your thoughts. That can become another form of overthinking. You don't need to sit around asking, was that thought really me? Was that thought my ego? What does this thought mean? Am I conscious enough? No, sometimes a thought is just a thought. Let it pass. The point isn't to become obsessed with observing yourself. The point is to become less controlled by whatever happens to appear in your mind. And this becomes especially useful during difficult moments. When you're angry, instead of immediately reacting, you can notice, I'm angry. When you're afraid, you can notice, I'm afraid. When you're overwhelmed. Then give yourself a moment. That moment might be only 5 seconds, but 5 seconds can change what happens next. You don't have to respond to every emotion immediately. You don't have to send the message immediately. You don't have to make the decision immediately. You don't have to believe the worst-case scenario immediately. You can pause, you can breathe, you can observe, and then choose. That is a form of freedom. If you're enjoying this reflection, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need to hear this, and subscribe to Rucky Reflections. Because we're going to keep exploring these deeper questions about the mind, identity, consciousness, and the person you're becoming. Now let's go even deeper. If you can observe your thoughts, and you can observe your emotions, and you can notice your reactions, then perhaps you don't have to define yourself by any single one of them. You can experience sadness without becoming a sad person. You can experience fear without becoming a fearful person. You can experience doubt without becoming someone who can't succeed. You can experience anger without deciding that you're an angry person. Experiences move through you. And you can learn from them without turning them into permanent identities. Think about clouds in the sky. A cloud appears. It changes shape. It moves. Another one comes. The sky doesn't have to chase it away. It doesn't have to hold on to it. It simply gives it space. Your thoughts can be approached in a similar way. A thought comes, you notice it, you don't have to chase it, you don't have to hold on to it, you don't have to fight it, you can let it move. And another thought will come, and another. And eventually you begin realizing, I don't have to follow every thought. That's a powerful realization. Because the mind will always have something to say. It will have opinions about your appearance, your relationships, your career, your future. Your past, your choices, your progress, your worth. It will compare you to someone you don't even know. It will remind you of something you wish you had done differently. It will create imaginary conversations. It will predict things that haven't happened. That's the mind. You don't have to hate it. In fact, your mind is trying to help you in many ways. It learned patterns because patterns helped you navigate life. But you don't have to give every pattern complete authority. You can listen. Without obeying, you can notice. Without becoming, you can think. Without believing, and you can feel. Without letting the feeling define your entire reality. So here's something I want you to practice today. At some point, stop whatever you're doing for 30 seconds. Don't change anything, just notice. Notice your surroundings, notice your body, notice your breathing. Notice the thoughts moving through your mind. And instead of trying to control them, simply observe. You might notice, I need to do this later. I wonder what they think of me. I'm hungry. I need to reply to that message. Why did I do that? Whatever appears, let it appear. And then notice, I am aware that I'm thinking. That simple recognition is enough. You don't need to force some huge spiritual experience. You don't need to suddenly feel completely peaceful. You're simply practicing the ability to notice. And the more you notice, the more you realize that there is a difference between having an experience and being defined by the experience. That's where self-awareness begins. Not by becoming perfect, not by eliminating every negative thought, but by becoming curious about what happens inside you, so the next time your mind tells you you're not enough. Pause the next time it tells you you're behind. Pause the next time it tells you something bad is going to happen. Pause and ask, is this a fact or is this a thought? You might discover that you don't need to fight the thought. You just needed to stop confusing it with reality. And perhaps that's one of the greatest things you can learn about yourself. You are allowed to question the voice inside your head. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to outgrow old beliefs. You are allowed to experience emotions without becoming them. And you are allowed to create a little space between what your mind says and what you choose to do. Because that space is where your choices live. That's where your response lives. That's where your freedom begins. So tonight, when you catch yourself thinking something negative about yourself, don't immediately say, that's true. Don't immediately say, that's false. Just say, noticing this thought. Stay there for a moment, because maybe you don't need to silence your mind. Maybe you just need to stop handing it the microphone every time it speaks. Your thoughts are part of your experience. Your emotions are part of your experience. Your memories are part of your experience. But none of those things have to become the complete definition of who you are. You are still changing, still learning, still becoming, and underneath all the noise, there is the simple ability to notice, to pause, to choose, to return to the present. So the next time your mind starts telling you who you are, listen carefully. And then ask, is this who I am? Or is this simply what I'm thinking, right? Those are not the same thing, and realizing that might be the beginning of seeing yourself completely differently. If this video gave you something to think about, like it, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe to Rucky Reflections. And remember, you don't have to believe every thought you think. You don't have to fight every thought you think. You can simply notice. You can breathe. You can choose. And you can return to yourself. Because you are not every thought passing through your mind. You are the person who gets to decide which ones deserve to shape your life.